Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started with the next panel. My name is Brigadier General Retired Ray Davis, and on behalf of the Army Aviation Association of America, it's an honor to moderate this panel of industry experts as we talk about the industry perspective of the modular open system approach. We've heard a lot about the Army's perspective on MOSA all week, both in our current platforms and future platforms. And that task falls to industry to accomplish that. So we wanted to get the perspective from some industry leaders. We have a very distinguished panel today. On my left, we have Mr. Keith Flail, Executive Vice President, Military Business, Bell Textron. Mr. Dave Harrell, Vice President, General Manager, BAE Systems. Mr. Brandon White, Vice President, General Manager, Northrop Grumman. And Mr. Stu Wildman, Senior Vice President, Strategy, Sierra Nevada Corporation. So we're going to kick things off with just opening thoughts from each of our distinguished panels. Keith, over to you.
Thanks, sir. So first of all, I appreciate the opportunity to be up here today with this great panel. One thing, being from Bell, typically seen as a more air vehicle, centric company, but doing some really unique things on MOSA. And I'll give the first captain obvious comment, is that the Army really does mean modular, and they really do mean open. So kind of a simplistic view of that, but some really exciting things that we're doing there so that the Army can address this and get what they need and get to those proof points. So I look forward to talking more about it here with the panel.
Thank you. Dave?
Yeah, thanks. Excuse me. Thanks, Ray. And thanks for allowing us to be here today. I think this is going to be a really interesting panel. We've got lots to talk about. It is clear, like Keith said, that the Army's serious about MOSA. You see it in their acquisition decisions very clearly. I'm looking forward to having a conversation about the opportunities and some of the challenges that we see between industry members and between industry and the government. I mean, I represent a business that's really not in platform OEM. We're a supplier of mission systems, so that's the lens through which we see this, and it'll be great to talk to the OEMs and the other mission system providers about how we collectively move forward.
Thank you. Brandon?
Yeah, thanks, General Davis. Really appreciate the opportunity to participate in the conversation today. I mean, I think it's very clear that MOSA is here now. It's being used and leveraged, and we're starting to see the fruits of all of the work there. There's more work to be done, but in my mind, it's really about making sure we're harnessing the power of the U.S. innovation inside of A&D, but outside of A&D, and bringing that to bear for the warfighter, and really doing that in a time scale and a cost scale that's never been seen before. So from our point of view, it's an incredibly vital tool, and we need to be making sure we're doing everything we can to accelerate it. At the end of the day, it's about putting capability very quickly in the warfighter's hands for the ones that are out there protecting us. So it's in all of our interests to make sure that we figure this out and get it deployed.
Thank you for that. I think we all agree the need to go fast is definitely there. Stu, over to you.
Yeah, so this is a topic that I've been working on probably for the last 15 years. And it's really important to companies like Sierra Nevada that are a large middle tier company, because we work with large primes and we continuously need to fit within the architectures and designs that they have out there. We also work with smaller companies, and we try to bring invention and innovation into our products and into the products we supply to larger corporations and so forth. And so the power of this is that by opening it up, we actually get an opportunity to quickly evaluate, assess its longevity of the technology, and then put it in the field and move on to the next technology or the next problem or the next challenge. And so that's what I really like about open architectures, is we're not having a conversation about how do we exchange data or how do we get to interchangeability. We're actually just doing it and getting the benefits of it.
Thank you for those opening remarks. We're going to move into some questions for the panel members now, and we're going to start with you, Keith. So I think we all agree that the Army's made the move towards MOSA. Why do you think they did that? What drove the Army to implement MOSA requirements?
Yeah, it's a variety of things, but affordability being one of them, the ability to do this so that they have the flexibility and the opportunity to change out a component from company A versus company B, or to rapidly insert a new capability. Some of the stuff that's in Dave's portfolio, a lot of countermeasures. So you think about the future threats that you always have some new weapon system and you develop a countermeasure and countermeasures, and that process continues to go on all the time. And we have to continue to stay ahead of our adversaries and stay agile. I think that's a really strong use case as to why, when you look at some of the things we've had to do with aircraft survivability equipment over the years, then there's lots of other examples that are out there. So truly having that modular open system that can support that, it has to be affordable. You have to be able to do it in a timely manner to rapidly insert those capabilities, and you have to be able to address obsolescence. So when you want to move to something new, or perhaps the swap of something has come down and you want to be able to take something off the aircraft because you're always worried about weight, and they've been able to package something into a smaller system, you want to be able to do that and change it out where the system can recognize it, and the Army gets the choice of doing that the way they want to. Do they want to come back to the OEM? Do they want to come back to an integrator? Do they want to do it themselves? And I think it's extremely powerful in terms of how these platforms stay relevant over time, because of, just look in the commercial market, how quickly things change in terms of software and capabilities, and the Army has to have that same kind of agility. So it's absolutely essential based off the threat and based off of the budget environment that we're in.
Thank you.
Maybe one additional comment I'd add to that as well is this, thinking about mission tailorability. So giving real flexibility in the end warfighter's hands to choose the payload, to choose the capability or technique they need to carry in particular, and offload other things they may not need, and really be able to tailor a system real time. I think is maybe a not originally intended consequence, but something we're going to start seeing more and more as we see more MOSA capabilities really fielded.
If I can, Ray, as a platform OEM, Keith will always say things to me like swap, 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 right? And so what that means, and a big part of the MOSA approach, is getting away from stovepiped, federated capabilities, right? We got to be able to have multi-function sensors and processing and leverage processing that's already on the platform. And so that just naturally drives you down the path of needing to be flexible, needing to provide the Army with freedom of maneuver when it comes to choosing what applications and what capabilities. And to Keith's point, speed is everything, right? Rapid reprogramming to stay ahead of that cat and mouse game of the countermeasure and countermeasure.
I'd like to also say, in this world now, we're seeing a lot of software-defined things. We're essentially reprogramming or repurposing multi-purpose hardware for new functions or new capabilities. And as we do that, we learn more and more about how we can break down the stovepipes or the previous ways that we process things and do them differently, because the technologies now are different and enabling new ideas or new algorithms and new techniques to actually do old jobs, but faster and more relevant to the problem that we're actually trying to solve.
And thank you, gentlemen. That's great insight. For this next question, we take it down to the end. So, Stu, this one's for you. Will MOSA really improve warfighting capability, development speed, or cost, or really enhance the support of the fleet?
Okay, so that's probably the easiest, and thank you for the easiest question. Actually, it is very clear that by opening up systems, we are getting advancements and improvements faster than we've ever done it before. We're also getting richer data, and we're also getting a better participation from the supply chain, so that when I have problems, when I have issues associated with getting a particular component or a particular item or even a data product, by being open and having these standards that we can ask industry to participate in, then we open up the market space. And when we do that, we always deliver better products for our customers, and specifically for the U.S. Army.
Yeah, go ahead, Ray.
Maybe I can just add, recent examples, we've seen very clearly that openness and that interchangeability can drive quick competition in the market, particularly if there are challenges, and bringing a better capability in many cases, and in our example, if almost effectively half the price just by being able to have that open interface and reach out to a broader set of the technology base. So I think we're seeing real examples of that now.
That's fantastic insight. So that the first set of questions really drove our focus or addressed the needs for MOSA. We're going to shift it a little bit now and talk about some of the challenges. So Dave, for you, what are the biggest challenges facing industry and the military in the transition to open architectures? Examples: supply chain, competitive issues, or intellectual property.
Yeah, good question. I think we spend a lot of time talking about the symptoms of the overarching problem. We talk about IP rights and we talk about competition, and but from my perspective, it all boils back to communication and alignment. I'll give you a couple of examples to stick with the IP data rights. First position from the government is often, I need everything. I need unlimited rights. And the first position from industry is you can't have anything, right? And we all know the answer is somewhere in between, and yet we're both asking for the extremes. And so that's a communication issue. We don't do the work to say, what do I really need and what can I really give that doesn't compromise me? Another example is we moderate between the A in MOSA being approach or architecture. Those are very different. They have very different meanings and very different emotional responses from each side. And then just a third example is there are no fewer than 10 different MOSA things that we talk about. And in fact, if we could have simplification around there, when you say MOSA, what do you really mean? We've got things like SOSA and CMOS that really overlap each other on the hardware side. And so why do we talk about them differently? Why can't we converge around something? And same thing with FACE and Victory on the software side as an example. There's a lot of overlap there. Why can't we sort of simplify how we're talking about these things, and then have very consistent and concise communication from the top down that's going to drive alignment for us. So for me, the biggest challenge is one of broad communication gaps that we need to figure out how to close.
If you don't mind, I'd like to weigh in on that too. So from my perspective, there are multiple standards and multiple approaches for it. But what we would, as industry, what we would like to have a dialogue to start with is, what are we trying to get out of the openness? What exactly is the benefit that we're trying to get? Are we trying to increase or decrease the time necessary to bring new features in? Are we trying to expand the interchangeability of parts so that the functionality is kind of the same, but we have more and more suppliers for it? Are we trying to get to a point where our logic systems don't have to do translations between various protocols? If we understand that better, we're going to follow, adopt, and deliver open architectures that provide the actual intended benefit that the customer's asking for.
Sure.
I can build on that. I think that's a great place to start in terms of thinking broader than just the engineering and the architecture. And one of the most important lessons we've certainly learned is you have to have the entire enterprise aligned to the objectives of that MOSA intent, right? So it's not, okay, we might need this new capability. Let's start thinking about a way we would acquire that, and let's program some money in the future. That's not going to work when we have built in the architecture the capacity to, like I said, deliver every 10 weeks. So let's talk about a process flow that lets you change capability on a tactical platform with all of the security and all of the weapon safety and all the other flight safety critical things. How do you have an enterprise that can change that every 10 weeks, right? That's not a once and using the traditional process. And even if we can produce those changes, how do you get that in training? How do you make sure it's sustainable? How do you train and then deploy in certain areas? So in my mind, it's the entire process flow that ends up with capability in warfighters' hands that has to be transformed to take advantage of MOSA. Otherwise, it's going to stop when it comes to, okay, now let's start iterating.
And one thing is just culturally, I mean, it is a big shift. So the community at large, people getting on board that MOSA is real. It does need to be modular. It does need to be open. And if you don't think the Army's serious about MOSA, go download the recent GAO report on FLRAA to understand how serious they are about MOSA. It's about the air vehicle and the architecture, the approach, the full weapon system. So it's here, and I just think that's some of. I think we as a community at large, we're getting there, but there's a certain cultural shift there of this is how we're going to do business going forward.
We're going to start with you. We just had a panel, with our international partners talking about interoperability, and to reflect on that, as we transition to MOSA with new capability that we're fielding, we still have the enduring fleet. So, how will MOSA impact the enduring fleet?
I think that the most important impact it will have on the enduring fleet is really breaking the mold of what it's taken in the past from a cost and timeline standpoint to keep up with the threat. And frankly, that's the current fleet, right? Yeah. So, we've got a lot of work to do, but over the next 10 to 15 years, we're fighting with that fleet. And that's the fleet that's going to need to help us position with things like ALE, with things that are going to be coming together in parallel with the future fleet. And so in my mind, MOSA is the tool that lets us break the mold of what it really takes to modernize and quickly update the existing fleet and be able to keep pace of the current threat and then position and train up for the future capabilities that are coming alongside it.
I'd like to also say that there are right now in the business, there are bridging architectures that are there that help keep relevant the older systems that can't necessarily go through a full-blown revitalization, but can allow them to live within the architecture that they were built with, which was right for the time that they were designed, and take information in that they might not have been able to get before, but there are intermediary architectures that can deliver that in a format, in a style, and at a pace that legacy or that system that is not ready to be upgraded can still achieve what they need to achieve.
Thank you. Fantastic insight. This next question, dealing with challenges, Keith, over to you. Does the DoD and the Army need to get better at identifying and writing requirements for open approaches? How can industry help in this process?
Yeah, I think that gets back to what Dave touched on approach versus architecture. I actually think on the requirement side for MOSA, what they've done in terms of laying out the use cases, the things that your system needs to be able to do so that you can address obsolescence, so that you can rapidly integrate those new capabilities and you can prove it out. We're teamed with Sierra Nevada on FARA, and some of what's happening on the FARA program to me is exciting. The government's laid in several open system verification demos. So for us to do this, we set it up, we leave, third party comes in, and they ring it out and they run those use cases. So the proof points of getting there. So that, is that approach or is that architecture? There's I believe still several ways that you could instantiate MOSA, but the point is it giving them what they need in terms of the when you go to prove it out that you can in fact do the things that you need to do with the system.
Yeah, if I can build on that, I mean, the acquisition community is pretty large and bureaucratic, right? And we can say what we want to do up here as a strategy, but it really gets down to how the scoring criteria gets written in a very specific RFP. And so, if schedule trumps technology in the scoring criteria, companies make trades around how robust my MOSA architecture or approach is going to be. So it's really important back to that communication piece, and especially on things like OTAs, where we have a lot more flexibility to continue the dialogue deep into the process. We need to make sure we're understanding what the priority is, because when we're trying to win a competition, we're playing to how it's going to get scored. Right. So if MOSA, and I think to Keith's point, Army is clearly making a statement that MOSA we will make decisions based on your ability to prove out MOSA, and so that's a really good first step bold step, we got to make sure that translates down to how we're going to score on some of these competitions.
So maybe I would just add, I think, first off, I think the Army's doing a pretty darn good job so far. We've seen some recent examples of really getting the requirements in a place that drives prioritization of those when you're looking at the overall trade space of risk, cost, and the capability. I think from my point of view, I think that we really need to make sure we continue to refine those standards that you mentioned before and make sure that we're in that constant dialogue. The other thing I would say that's vital, particularly in certain capability areas, is to think about it almost like agile software. And you think about near, medium, and long-term horizons. And so there needs to be an overarching capability horizon. This is where we want to take the capability. And then you break that down into incremental epics and then break it down there from into the sort of nearer term objectives. And so that type of vision and visualization long-term, whether it's through CRADAs, whether it's through mission modeling and analysis we're doing jointly, but ultimately establishing that with capability areas and in platforms positions the entire community to be on the same page of where do we need to be in the future, and then we can make trades along the way to align to that vision. But I think that's an incredibly important part of shaping how we get value out of MOSA beyond just sort of the technical near term, how do you get compliant with MOSA?
One other thing to think about is that if you really focus on the modularity aspect, then what you can do is you can kind of untangle the IP problems, because modules that are well written, that are well contained, that deliver the functionality in a discrete way, then IP can be maintained about that module, and another person's IP can be contained in their module, and so you can even have interchangeability and not lose IP because you've done this modular approach, so things can be swapped out in a way that's discrete and manageable.
Thank you for that, gentlemen. So the final question on challenges, Stu, we're going to start with you again. What challenges will we face in the future with open approaches or open architectures that we may not currently be addressing?
Yeah, I think one of the big things is that as we start to get systems that are well connected together or working together in interoperable ways and built in these kinds of things, the data that they produce is going to start to be flooding through a variety of different threads, and we have to be careful that the data doesn't get double counted or doesn't get unintentionally modified, some way of tracking the data and the attributes of the data so that the data is actually getting preserved as it's being used. And that's going to be an important part, because as systems get open, they get easier to connect with, and sometimes some of the players, some of the scenarios open up the possibility of getting bad data in or intentionally bad data in. And so having ways to keep the integrity of the data and the information that these systems produce, have that be part of the standard or approach as well.
Yeah, maybe if I could build from that too. I think that's an important example that reinforces the need for, I'll say, extended technical depth and breadth to ensure that the architecture delivers the ultimate performance result as it's modified over time. So my intent there is, yes, we can swap out individual components, but making sure you have a team and organization that's focused on ensuring that you're still compliant with all of those additional requirements. Otherwise, you could be introducing additional risk into the system that you're not recognizing when you're making those changes.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you for that. So now we're going to shift over and talk a little bit about what recommendations we'd like for the future. Dave, this one's for you. Where's industry focusing that we may need to change? Are there opportunities for industry to mutually support or collaborate with each other to meet Army aviation needs?
Thank you. I would say that there's some goodness going on in industry that maybe we're not taking credit for, and so I know that there are spots where we're already doing this very, very well. And I know from BA Systems, we've done some work hosting processing and algorithms from other companies on our missile warning system and leveraging that. And again, this is all about how do we make things multifunction and reduce the swap. We actually are the prime mission equipment provider for the Compass Call platform in the Air Force, and that platform is going to a pure software-defined radio baseline, and we already are taking applications from other government agencies, other industry members, and everything, and we're just doing it. I mean, but I think a lot of those, and I know these guys all probably have examples too, where we're probably not talking enough about how we're already doing it. I do think that from an industry perspective, we just need to get out of the mindset of I'm selling you a box or I'm selling you some hardware, and we need to, and we always sort of throw up our hands and say, well, I don't know how to figure it out if I don't sell you a box. And we need to just be more creative around what is the business model that ideally works for us to make this inevitable move to open systems. And I think it's hard when you've only ever done it one way for 50 years, and you only know one business model. But there are those out there who are doing it very effectively, and we just need to make the leap to get there.
Yeah, I would say first, couldn't agree more. I think you're spot on there. The other thing I think industry has a responsibility to do is help connect the Army with all of the other capabilities across the Joint Force that we know that we're all developing and investing in, and bringing that to the value proposition of the Army. Other people's money, making sure that we're really truly aligning in terms of leveraging those capabilities, whether it's a technical capability, a software architecture, or frankly, an open reference architecture and other things that sound a lot like MOSA. They just might use different words that are being successful in driving business models that work, but also iterating capability inside of a platform architecture that I think we're all learning quickly, and it's going to be the path to success for us to help the armies get to where they need to be.
Thank you. Keith, what, if anything, can the DoD do to speed the transition, simplify the process, enhance the solutions, or reduce the cost?
Wow.
A lot of questions there.
Yeah. So I'll probably, some folks may not agree with this, but there is a very well-established DoD acquisition process, the big A. It comes down to the same fundamentals to get these things right. Is you got to get your requirements and you got to keep them stable. If you have all this requirements instability, it drives the government crazy, it drives us crazy, and it drives up costs. So if you really can get your requirements laying flat, you get your resourcing aligned, you get a good acquisition strategy on what you're going to do. It's a team sport, I guess, is the point. And there's plenty of examples in Defense Acquisition University case studies of ones that didn't go so well and ones that went very, very well. And when you fundamentally look at it, a lot of times it's if you pull on those threads, that's what made things derail. So whatever we do related to a process, I'm of the mindset sometimes we collectively will think we can steer around this or steer around that, but at the end of the day, you've got to get all those things right, or you don't have the community moving in the right direction, and you'll drag on schedule, you'll drag on cost, and everybody suffers. So it's just that unified approach is really important.
Thank you.
I think another thing is that we need to continue through life to keep this idea invigorated, because once we let that contract and we start to deliver that first system and we get wrapped up in the imperativeness of getting the product out there, we can tend to lose track of the fact that this product is going to be in the field and being used for a long time. And keeping it open and keeping the community open for new ideas coming in from third parties or from peers in industry keeps that vital, and that actually brings down the overall cost of the acquisition, because you can use it for a longer period of time and it remains relevant for a longer period of time.
Yeah, maybe one other to kind of tie those two together. I think, as a new capability is coming forward, I think it's incredibly important, to your point, of stability, getting to an IOC. But as I mentioned before, having that vision of where you're going to be going in the long view and starting to think about that incremental approach that lays in right behind that IOC, and having an acquisition structure that's set up to work with that. So if you're going to be iterating capability on a monthly, weekly, quarterly basis, you can't be doing your acquisition cycle at that rate. So how do you have the plan laid in so that as you hit an IOC, you're ready to launch into leveraging the power of MOSA to really start deploying capability. And that, once you get to IOC, that's not the time to start thinking about the acquisition model to continue the model. It will atrophy, and to your point, you will lose the momentum that you have with the architecture that's built in from day one.
Yeah, and I think the word that I would key on that Keith mentioned is stability. So early conversations about what we're trying to achieve collectively, prevent us from saying, oh, I know we that was the statement of work, that was the path we were going down, but now we need to implement this approach. Well, that all creates rework, that all creates scope conversations that sort of just delay. So the earlier we can have conversations collectively about what are we trying to achieve, the better aligned we'll be throughout.
No, I couldn't agree more. So, Dave, while you're talking, I'm going to give you this next one. Are there areas, like issues, technologies, et cetera, in the transition that should receive more attention in the near term? And then think about also the far term.
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I guess from a technology perspective, I'm not sure, but I would go back to what I said earlier around how do we simplify this? How do we go from multiple standards to fewer standards, but ones, was just mentioned in other services, we hear things like government referenced architecture, and we sort of know what that means, and we all can line up around that. And so I'm not suggesting just go pick one of the dozen that are out there, but how do we simplify the communications such that when we say the word, we all know what that means? So I think there's something around an alignment around the terms that we use. And then again, I think that, again, it's not a technology, I'm avoiding your technology question, but it's back to the business model. How do we make sure that, I mean, the DoD knows that, we need to be profitable in order to keep our doors open, to continue to innovate, to bring the right capabilities for what you need. And so, we're in this to support the mission, and we need to also be able to keep our doors open. So how do we get creative around the business models so that we can accomplish both of those things? Because, frankly, you need all of us around so that you have choices for the future.
Maybe I'll take a swing at the technology comment. And I think one of the things that's obvious near term to me is making sure we continue to refine what connectivity, what networking, what assurance we need in the near, medium, and long term, and that we are focusing on how we build that into MOSA across all of the different capabilities. In my mind, that's one of the most near-term vital things I think we could coalesce around to make sure we're all pointed in the right direction.
Thank you for that. So we saved some time for questions from the audience, so please be thinking what you would like to ask the panel. But I do have one more. Brandon, it's for you. How can industry help DoD, the Army, and Army Aviation identify emerging open architecture, softwares, upgrades in a more flexible and efficient manner?
So, great question. I'm going to take a shot and then invite others. I think, from my point of view, I think we're headed in the right direction. I will say, the more conversation we have about those mission capability priorities in a time horizon, gives us the ability to steer the ship towards those outcomes. So I think that's an important place where we can really continue to open up those conversations. And we've seen that working well in some places, and be able to position us for where we think we need to be to bring technology, to bring software, to bring commercial capabilities alongside. By the way, we can't forget about the billions of dollars spent in the commercial tech space. How do we harness those to really align to where the Army needs to be?
I'd like to actually piggyback off something I heard from the previous panel, and that had to do with the idea that we're doing these exercises, multinational exercises, and there's a desire to keep the network alive after the exercise to allow continuous experimentation. As the Army and as DoD goes through these experiments and they get their milestone events and they put out their press releases and so forth, Don't fold up the tent. Let the industry continue to participate and innovate inside those architectures using things like digital twin technologies and so forth, so that we get an opportunity to see the technologies that are there and even some of the data transfer technologies that are coming from the IT providers in the commercial world.
Thank you. That's fantastic. I'm definitely hearing some recurring themes: clarity, simplicity, commonality, stability. Yeah, I think we're on the right track. We got a ways to go, but I definitely think we're headed in the right direction. So right now we're going to open it up to the floor for questions. If you would come down to the microphone because you're being videotaped. So.
Hey, gentlemen, thank you for your time. My name's
A little closer.
Major Chris Duchar. I work in PO Aviation. I'm an APM. And I hear you guys talking a lot, obviously, about MOSA, and I appreciate it. I'm glad that there's a deep interest in it. The question that I have is, at my level, at the APM level, there seems to be a lot of misunderstanding at the lower levels of our industry partners of what MOSA is. So the question is, what are you doing to train your organizations to better understand MOSA so that at our level, we're acting as good industry partners with the government?
Yeah, great question. And again, it goes back to the sort of alignment and simplicity piece. I mean, we actually had a small team go off and do some research. Let's list all the different architectures or approaches and just put them in one PowerPoint chart, and then sort of analyze how much they overlap, how different they are, and it's quite striking. Just how many terms we use and just what it means. And so we've then taken that, and what we're trying to do internally to the company for the people it matters most is to educate them on, when you hear the word victory, this is what it means. When you hear JCA, this is what it means, and here's how it applies back to SOSA, right? So it's this big maze of things, but I think the first thing we decided to do is just put it all on a piece of paper and stare at it for a minute, and then start to talk to within our engineering organization. What does that mean for us? How do we bucket these things, and how do we make sure when we're saying the term, what do we actually mean, and what does the government actually, receive when we transmit that term?
A little more, just similarly, I'd also say we make sure that we're building repositories of the tools that interface with those standards and architectures. So we have one version of this thing as opposed to letting our different teams build those capabilities and then referencing that and making it part of the sort of training conversation to ultimately be able to reuse. And if we've got one that works, it is a building block that we're going to reuse over and over again. I think that's an important aspect. And then the other thing I would tie, MOSA's not that far different in my mind from model-based everything. So frankly, we spend less time on, I say, our more junior talent and more time on our more senior talent, really building out the skill set to operate in a model-based everything environment, to use those tools and to speak in that language fluently. And we have to keep doing that.
Yeah, I think the message has to come from the top down. We really do have to ingrain that in our thinking. At Sierra Nevada, the projects that I run through my IRAD division, there's a requirement. I require them to explain to me how they're going to bring this to market and what architecture are they going to fit into and why. Why did they decide that? That's a criteria before I will fund their investment, because I need them to be thinking about not just the technology, but also how does it get delivered in a way that accelerates the delivery. Because I can't build technologies that can't be translated and fielded. They have to be technologies that can hit the ground running and get integrated quickly into systems.
Yeah, also the education process, and Bell being seen as a more platform-centric company, with a lot of the workforce focused on speed, range, endurance, payload, those kinds of things. So it's been an education process within the company that, hey, this MOSA thing is really, really important. So we've had a lot of learning, a lot of education over the last several years across the workforce.
Thank you, gentlemen. Great question. We have time for a couple more.
So So hello, I'm Alicia Taylor. I'm actually with the Open Group FACE Consortium. So you guys have mentioned FACE Victory SOSA, and incidentally, you guys are also members of the FACE Consortium, and so your members have helped us develop our infrastructure. So what can we do as the FACE Consortium to help you and to help address the MOSA initiative that's coming down from the Army and actually from DOD?
So I'm happy to start. I mean, I would say I think there's a lot of positive that's come out of all of those consortiums, and the one thing I would say is making sure that we're coordinated and collating across them, so that in many cases we have very similar teams and technical staff supporting multiple of those consortiums, and that's the right way that we look at efficiency and commonality. And so I would just ask that as we're laying out the cadence and the focus areas across them, that we are doing as much as we can to commonize the cadence and commonize that, just to make it that much more efficient in how we're spending precious resources on important things, but things that we want to constantly get more efficient at.
Yeah, I would say that we wouldn't be where we are on this journey without those consortiums and without those working groups to get there. I think, DevCom's just put out this RFP for sort of MOSA risk reduction, and if you read through it, one of the things it talks about is consensus-based approaches. And because, we can go down this MOSA path and have MOSA for each different platform, right? That's tailored to that platform, and that doesn't get us where we want to go, because we're really trying to go from, federated stovepipe to enterprise solutions. And so just making sure that when we're moving forward, we're really continuing to have that enterprise thought and consensus-based approach, so that we're not each program office or each PEO isn't driving to their version of MOSA.
Anyone else?
Yeah, if nobody else has a question.
Thanks. Sorry about that. Hey, John Stow. So the Vertical Lift Consortium and Aviation Business Technology Consortium, in the VLC members meeting on Tuesday, I think it was Tuesday, we had the question to one of the panel members in the budgeting and requirements side of the Army about MOSA budgets. And hearing from a lot of the consortium members across the AMTC, the question of, well, if I'm not a sub to Bell, by the way, congratulations. If I'm not a sub to Bell, how do I get on the FLRAA platform? And I'm hearing everybody on the panel describe that future capability, the post-IOC iterative cycle of the processes. So as we shape the future of industry response to the government, how can we make a better request for them to communicate budgets at a modular level? Is it sufficient for us to still have platform-centric budgets and assume that it'll be directed competition to the prime? Or are we expecting more granular competition at a component level continuously through the life of the program? What is your feeling from the industry supplier? Are we looking at changing the business model of funding for components in the future? And how do you want senior leaders to hear that in future PALM cycles and such? Thanks.
I think, looking at FLRAA, I think we have a pretty good understanding of the increment one, the first, from a requirement standpoint, back to that stability piece of it. But even within the government program office, they're already standing up the increment two, product manager there to be thinking about exactly what my colleagues have been talking about is, staying in front of this. What are you going to put in? What are the follow-on things that are there? But I think having the infrastructure within the aircraft for us, we actually have a common backbone on our FLRAA solution and on our FARA solution. And I'll point to SNC again as an example. A lot of what we understand as the requirements for the capabilities that need to go on the FARA, SNC is not just bringing SNC content, they're looking at best of breed of what are the other things that are out there that can come onto the platform. And as I mentioned earlier, I think that's just a natural evolution of the platform, because we're going to have to bring capabilities onto these platforms that don't even exist yet to counter some threat that's out there, or new waveforms. I mean, all those are the things that we just don't know yet. So I think we have to have have the air vehicles set up so that they can support that you can bring that in and change things out. And then the resourcing aspect of it, I think that's an it depends as well, because we understand what our requirements are and what we need to do and what we need to deliver. But as you have these other incremental capabilities, I think that's there's several different ways that could go. It could go through the prime. It could be a mission system integrator. It could be the government doing it themselves. So the funding sources could vary for that as well.
I think one of the things that's going on as well is, there are always planned upgrades. There are always ideas about getting the initial capability out and then ramping up capabilities. And if budgets are associated with that help keep that open architecture door open, then what you'll see is the providers like Sierra Nevada, but many others, are actually going out there and looking to keep or to expand the capability that they can deliver. And in doing so, there are times when, there's just a better athlete out there, and those better athletes can come to the table and take that job on. But again, we've got to not create barriers so that they can't compete because they can't speak the language of the integration.
Thank you. Any other questions? I think we have time for one more.
I've got a real quick one. So you guys listed a bunch of different things, and all very interesting. Let me put you on the spot. Each one of you, what's the one thing right now that would speed your company up? It could be an internal thing. It could be your company to industry, or it could be something between you and the Army. What's that one thing that you think would speed the process right now?
For me, I think if we could have a better approach to data rights and IP on both sides, if we could start with a better conversation, because I know for us it gets stuck in the hands of lawyers and contracts folks, and that ends up creating cycles every single time. So if collectively we could have a better understanding, a better approach, I think that would speed things up.
I think for us, the very clear example is, as I mentioned before, that bigger acquisition game plan that goes alongside the capacity to change quickly, and doing that with intention, with the right structure and focus, and avoiding sort of the path of least resistance when it comes to how to acquire rapid innovation and get it onto existing platforms.
Yeah, I think one thing that will help is improving our ability to do configuration management and keep stability while continuing to grow. A lot of the program managers are nervous about changing out technologies or changing out things because they want that stability, but they don't have a really evaluating alternatives because they're plowing full speed ahead on what they've got to do. So help in management and helping these acquirers get more comfortable with configuration management with all the change that's going on.
Yeah, I'd say, and first of all, this is happening, but to maintain this intense focus on how you leverage technology and continue to move forward, and how you sequence that into the certification process and get their worthiness, because at the end of the day, we're putting humans in these machines, and they're leaving Mother Earth, so that process is incredibly important. But if we don't have a conscious effort to continue to look at all the different technologies that can bring greater capabilities, that can reduce weight, looking at allowables, looking at all those things that are there so that we can go faster, be cheaper, all of that, because at the end of the day, if we are not comfortable as a community of putting people in this machine so it can go airborne, and we have that drag, all of these other advancements we make in technology, it's not going to make the difference that we want. So those things have to continue to be very deliberately coupled together.
Well, gentlemen, I've gained a lot today. I've learned a lot from you all. I really appreciate your insight. I definitely think we're on a great trajectory with the Army, and we're going to achieve that ends, and we're going to be better for it in the end. We're going to be a better, more ready, more capable Army. With the little bit of time we have left, I'd like to just start with Keith and work our way down. Any final thoughts or comments?
We at Bell, we're humbled and honored to be selected for the FLAIR program, and we're excited to move forward. Thank you.
Yeah, just thanks for having us. Thanks for allowing us to have this really great discussion. I appreciate my panel mates here who are really willing to lean in. And yeah, I think I agree with your comment, Ray, about the trajectory. And we just got to collectively identify the pinch points and agree to work through them, and just understand that we all have to understand that this is happening. This is not something that we're going to work around or anything. This is the future, and we all got to get in the boat together.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So first, just thanks to Quad A for seeing the importance of this dialogue and to bringing this conversation to the forefront. And certainly from my point of view, MOSA is not something we're working on doing in the future. We are doing it today. We're seeing the value proposition of it today, and we've just got to make sure we're altering all of the other infrastructure in our own organizations and within the Army to be able to harness the power of that and really see the end result, which is incredible capability in the hands of warfighters.
And I'd like to thank you guys as well for letting us get up here and sort of give our ideas. And I have to say, I'm very excited that we're actually moving through and making this happen, because I've seen in my laboratories and in my systems, I've seen the benefits, and those benefits are incredible. And so now having the Army formally working toward getting that a key component of the systems they build, it's exciting for industry. Just watch us go.
Well, on behalf of Major General Retired Tim Crosby, our Quad A President, and our Army Aviation Branch Chief, Major General Mac McCurry, I want to thank you for your time today.